Okay, welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me. Nice to see you, so many of you here. Let me just start a bit about giving some context about Deutsche Bank. Okay, so Deutsche Bank, imagine, is a 25 to 30 billion revenue company. Okay, of that 25 to 30 billion revenue, we spend somewhere between 5 to 8 billion on technology. So you get a feel of how important technology is to us. Also in the company, from a global CIO perspective, I'm the CIO for HR, for example, we are reinventing our HR platforms. So many of you might be excited to know, for example, we're implementing Workday, which will go live next summer for DB globally across all of our countries, okay? As well as building and re-architecting the rest of the architecture as well. From India specifically, and I thought you might be interested to know this, over 40% of Deutsche Bank's operations and technology staff is in India. Over 40%. And by next year, that'll be 50%. So it gives you just an idea of the scale of which we're investing in technology, and we're investing it here in India. Okay, so my session today really is not going to be very technical, but my real goal is how do we get the CIO functions and how do we get technology from across the group and HR working closely together, because there's no doubt, right, that the two have to come hand in hand, okay? So you may have seen this chart, and by the way, these slides are all available afterwards. I'm not sure how useful they are, but you have access to them, so don't worry, okay? You may have seen this chart already, right? And when you look at that chart, the first question that comes to mind is, what is it that technology has done to show such a rapid innovation? That rate of change in growth is innovation. What is it they do in technology that has allowed that to happen? What is that magic sauce? And if you know that what that magic sauce is, how can I then apply that to other people, other teams, other businesses, other areas to get the same level of innovation? Now, I will give you my opinion on what I think that answer is. I think there is one thing that fundamentally has helped innovation in tech. Does anybody here have any views what that might be? Any clue? Pardon? Yeah, okay. I've got a slight perspective, but yeah. Anybody else got any ideas? Okay, I'll give you my view in a second. Whichever way you look at it though, okay, what's critical is that there's going to be massive change in the way we work in the company. And I think all of you know that, right? So therefore HR has a massive role to play in how that company is going to shape up, because everybody will be impacted. We talk a lot in HR and in technology, and you'll see a lot of products out here which talk a lot about talent acquisition, but there's a lot more than talent acquisition, right? The learning and development that you have to do is way, in my opinion, humble opinion, way more important than just acquiring the talent. Once you've acquired them, we have a responsibility to make sure that our people continuously develop. So I think this is absolutely critical. So all in all, the message here is how do we get the CIOs, i.e. technology and HR, to be really, really good buddies? Okay, so what I want to start with is just describe how does CIOs think at an enterprise level? How do we get to a situation, how do you understand how they think, so you get a feel of what's going through their minds? Well, essentially at the enterprise level, CIOs have a very simple concept. They look at how aligned the problem they're trying to solve is against strategic priorities and objectives. Is it core to what we do? And if it is core to what we do and they think is really important, whether it's value, whether it's complexity or risk, they will try to build it and have in-house capability because it's that important to us and we don't want to give that IP away, or the IP is significant in building the outcomes. If on the other hand the firm or the CIOs think it's not core to what we do, then they tend to fit in the second row and we tend to outsource or buy. Now I want to ask you a question. You can probably imagine, where do you think HR processes have sat historically? Which of these two rows would you see HR aligning to historically? That's probably the second one, right? Okay. But whatever you do, whether you buy or build, the technologists, the CIO groups, always look at two things. They look at architecture and they look at methodology. The architecture tells us what we are buying or what we are building, okay? The methodology tells us how we're building it. It's the process by which you're building it or by the process by which that product was built. Those two things taken together give the CIO comfort that what you're getting is fit for purpose. So whether you buy, whether you build, you should expect your CIO to do these two things. Look at the architecture of the solution and look at how it was built, the methodology, okay? Fundamentally, in every CIO, in every technologist, because they are a breed of people you have to understand, they fundamentally believe that the software is the value itself. Now, there's a whole culture element that runs behind software and how you value software. So for example, in some companies, the culture is very much you buy best of breed, always build it to perfection. In some companies, it's buy the cheapest solution I can find, it's okay. Or build to a reasonable level, you don't have to be perfect. And some companies, somewhere in between. The culture does dictate how a CIO will operate. But typically, these are the drivers of a CIO. There still remains some tension. And that tension is always there. And why has that tension been there? And sometimes it really does seem that HR and tech come from two different universes. We're like from completely different planets. Why is that? In essence, we are not. We have the same fundamental goals. As a technologist, the best thing that can happen for me is that my business, my HR users, right, or my employees are happy with what we produce, or the software that we buy, right? But we come from different angles. So if you look at HR, typically, HR will focus on the user experience, the features, the functions that you see. When you go out and look at products, you'll be wowed by what you see out there, right? So that is what you will see, because that's the value you take to your employees, the value you bring to your company. We see that too. But we have this obligation to ensure that you understand the information security risks, that you understand the integration aspects, because they're the things that will make you unsuccessful eventually. I have heard about real scenarios. For example, on the InfoSec side, I've heard of real scenarios where HR have purchased services, okay? And they've gone as far as signing the contracts. They've been even aware of the vulnerabilities, okay? Somebody's done something on Google and discovered the vulnerability is okay, got it signed off by HR and moved ahead. Only for tech to come at a much later stage after the contracts have been signed and said, by the way, do you realize this is the most malicious and simple hack that you can do? Anyone can hack this. It is so easy. Imagine if all your benefits data, if all your performance data was out in the market for everyone in the company. Imagine how much reputational damage, personal damage, hurt that might cause. So sometimes it feels like IT, the messenger, gets shot, even though these things have to be considered. And ultimately, it is a business decision. It is an HR decision. What risk do you want to take? Do you have mitigation in place? Do you really not care about InfoSec? Not hearing about it is not a good thing. You have to be told. That's what technology have to do. So you have to have a real partnership there. You have to, when you look at evaluate products, I'm sure many of you done an RFP. When you go through that, you have your criteria. Be rigid about it. Make sure you don't skip on the weighting. It's very easy to skip the weighting criteria. And then what happens, you get to the end of the process, and emotion comes in, and you can't make decisions, okay? So make sure your weighted decisions are in place beforehand. If there's only one thing that you take away from today, right? If you fall asleep for the rest of the session, right? I do implore you, just take the last bullet point, okay? The integration and data. That is fundamentally the most important thing you can take away from today, and you will see me stressing it throughout, and I'll explain why as I go along. So data has an ever-increasing importance to you, even for L&D specific to deliver the value they want to deliver. You must, when you look at products, give that a higher priority than you've ever done in the past. And I'll explain why as well, okay? You must. And that's going to be an ask that I'm going to ask for this session. So another reason why sometimes technology and HR don't seem to gel, and again, this is more for information. Depending on whether you buy or build, or whether your practice is to buy or build often in your company, right, you have ended up with a very different composition of team. If you buy products, the technical depth you have on your team will by definition be low, because you don't need to do much engineering. You're not doing much software development, okay? If you build products, the sheer depth you have of technology and skill set you have on your team is a lot more, okay? So this is very different. And also, if you buy products, you tend to follow the methodology of that product vendor. And those product vendors have their own run books, which tend to be waterfall. You go through a set of requirements. You then agree a functional design or a gap analysis. You then do configuration. You then get a test, and then you deploy. And that can take a matter of months. If you build, you'll tend to do Agile, which means you build software in a matter of weeks, and you show it to somebody, and you continue, and you keep building it as a minimum viable product, and you keep building and building and building on the product. So very different way of working, very different composition of team. So back to HR. Historically, HR purchases products, HR buys services driven on the internet. So you've not had much reliance on CIO. You haven't needed to, which, by the way, is a positive. You don't always want lots of techies around just for the sake of wanting techies, right? So it's good not to have so many. But in the future, you have to think differently. And it comes predominantly from that point I made earlier around data and data integration, which is really, really critical. And again, I'll keep emphasizing that as I go along. Has anyone thought about what's made technology successful? The one driver? No? Okay, I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but here's the answer. If you look at technology, it's the way they work that has allowed the innovation to happen. I guess now that I'm saying it, it sounds pretty obvious, right? But for me, it's very obvious, very clear that the way of working, i.e. working in an agile manner, is what has led to the sheer rapid innovation in technology. It is as simple as that. There's nothing more to it. Agile itself is experiential learning. What do? You experiment. You produce a first draft product, real working software. You show it to your users, right? You experiment, and if it doesn't work, you try again, you try again, you try again, you keep on developing. So you learn, you fail fast is what we call, but fail in tech doesn't mean failure. That's the beauty. Fail fast means you've learned, and you've stopped a much bigger error happening in 12 months down the road. The culture is so different. So Agile is really crucial to technology. If you want one or two words that best describe, if you have to describe what is Agile to somebody, I always use risk management. You'll see lots of texts, lots of academics describing what Agile is, but for me, honestly, it comes down to risk management, okay? What does it do? By following Agile, you minimize the risk that you, the users, the end users, don't get what you need or what you require or what you thought you wanted. Because when you do waterfall, you wait months and months and months to get the software. And then you realize, oh God, it's not what I really wanted. IT did something wrong, or I didn't specify my requirements. But in Agile, that doesn't happen because you're seeing something every few weeks. So you're always satisfied with what you're getting, and the control about what you build is in your hands. So look, I'm not going to go through Agile, the slides are available, but I would ask you, there's 3 things you can do immediately, okay, if you haven't done these already. Firstly, you can look at the Agile Manifesto. Okay? It's 12 core principles which stand the test of time. I love them to bits. Right? It's what we are pushing through Deutsche Bank. Right? If you understand those 12 Agile principles, you will see what it means to do Agile. Okay? You can implement that. And if you want an Agile framework, go with SAFe. Now, if you look at some of the consultants, they'll scare you to hell. They'll show you slides about how there's 100 different methodologies of Agile. Don't worry about it, ignore it. Just go and look at SAFe. It's an overarching framework. And if you can take those 2 and you start to implement Agile yourself. Second thing I would say is do it in 3 ways. Firstly, if you're doing tech projects yourself in HR, in L&D, go Agile. Work with IT, start to implement an iterative Agile model. So learn what Agile means through the change projects that you do with tech. Secondly, once you start learning, take some of your own core processes that you have in L&D itself and the rest of HR and do Agile. Nothing to do with tech. Practice the principles and what Agile preaches to do your own business as usual processes. And then thirdly, once you get comfortable with that, this is where you have to make the impact. There are 2 organizations, I believe, in HR that fundamentally need to pick up Agile. One is organizational design, and the second thing is you. Second group is you, learning and development, because you have to take, between the 2 groups, you have to take the company through the journey, and you have to reskill them to be able to work in an Agile way. It is absolutely critical. And I know there's some sessions on Agile or agility here as well. And finally, just a key risk I'd like to point out, because for anyone who's done Agile and has been involved in Agile transformation, I guarantee if you ask them, what's the biggest risk to Agile's being successful in your company? I guarantee you 95% of them will say product ownership. In other words, identifying the product owner and giving them the responsibility. Product owners are critical. Why? Because 1, they're an SME. They're an SME working with tech. 2, they're totally empowered to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. So as the coders develop software, the product owner is saying, yes, no, I like that, change that, as they go along, right? And finally, the product owner has to have the collaboration and communication skills, because they have to take this, what they're developing with IT, well, get together to work as a team first, and then take it back into your own HR processes and to the rest of the company. That you can start immediately, and I think you should. It's an imperative, in my opinion. So I've talked a bit about the methodology, which I think is really important. Then I just want to talk about architecture. If you look at this chart, you'll see a few things here, right? And you'll see that it correlates to the innovation chart that I showed you right at the beginning. You will see something there which says extreme programming. You'll see design patterns, you will see Agile manifesto, and you'll see SAFe. And you'll see how all these 4 things are a way of working in tech. These 4 things started that curve to go up massively, right, in IT delivery and IT innovation. And that's our way of working. And that's what you can benefit from. So I've put asterisks next to those 2 simply because I think there's no harm in you picking them up immediately and taking them for yourselves and for the rest of the company. I didn't highlight TOGAF. TOGAF is an architectural framework, because it's a bit dry, to be honest, although it'd be very useful. If you want to work with IT and look at IT architecture, I'm going to show you some examples, very simple examples. You should understand business architecture as well. So my recommendation there is look at BABOK, which is a business analysis body of knowledge. Look at that, because you can relate to that very easily and take the business architecture piece, and you'll get to grips with how then HR should work with technology. Architecture as a concept hasn't changed, okay? These are the foundations by which developers and technologists live and die. It's the one thing that makes sure that we can deal with unknowns. When you're writing software, you don't know what you're going to be doing the next day or the next week. You're dealing with a lot of unknowns. But the architecture and architectural patterns and architectural concepts and principles, they allow us to continue developing without knowing everything. So we live and die by them. And you need to understand that, which is why sometimes IT will say, no, wait, not over my dead body. It goes against my principles. Because they know that at some point we will pay the price for breaking that principle, but I can't tell you what exactly, because I don't know your detailed requirements. And that's why we're so passionate about architecture and architectural principles. And again, you need to understand that. So as far as architecture is concerned, right, I've raised 3 points here, which I've got from a book written by Pierre and Murat. Murat, by the way, is my CTO as well. And the key one that I'd like to highlight is the power of small. Okay. Imagine your software is like buying shoes. You should be able to go into a shop and buy shoes whenever you want and change them. And you can change them intraday whenever you want, because you might wear a different pair of shoes for running versus kickboxing versus going to the office or whatever. It doesn't matter. You should be able to change. And you can do that because shoes are a small thing. It's not all linked to your other garments, so you'd have to change the whole lot every time. So the power of small is how IT folks think. We've always thought like that, whether it was component-based, whether it was SOA, whether it's microservices, but now it's becoming easier and easier to implement. So the power of small, so when you look at solutions that you want to buy, don't go and look for this great big thing that does everything. Look for things that do small, discrete functions, because you know in a year's time, or 18 months' time, you're going to want to change it. The bigger it is, it's the harder to change, okay? Quality attributes here just refers to the fact that it's what we call non-functional. So it's back to the data integration, it's back to information security, it's back to performance. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how nice your system is, how good it looks, if it doesn't perform, if it takes 10 minutes for a click, you're going to be pretty annoyed, right? So these non-functional requirements are critical. The other thing to remember is that when you buy products in a competitive market, most competitors will catch up when it comes to features and functions. They really will. In a strong competitive market, as we see developing in India, right, just because one product doesn't have certain features, it will have them in 6 months' time. So features will always get delivered, because that's the product's, that is the nature of the product. Therefore, I'm back to data and the non-functional. It is critical, because they're the things that will bring you down and make your project unsuccessful. I'll skip the last one about design decisions, because most of the stuff we do is by. I've just given you here a conceptual vision. This is my conceptual vision in Deutsche Bank for HR. So what you're seeing here is really what we're doing. It's not some theory. I won't go through it in detail, please use it, but there are 4 layers you'll see there. There's UX right at the top, which is how you interact with your employees. This is the one thing that you want to control and manage as much as you can, because that's how your employees will see you, right? The user experience they get. That is critical for you, okay? The agility layer in the middle is a technical layer. That's the thing that allows you to plug and play. That has to be built by technology so you can plug it in components. So if you decide to change a pair of shoes, it's easy, done in no time. And this is the sort of architecture I am building at DB as we speak. The data layer, I go back, you must have control over your data. It is crucial. And again, I'm keeping a bit of a teaser at the moment, but I'll talk about it. But you must have your data so that it's available on demand for yourself and to other people in the company. And it must be of high quality. And finally, on the analytics, it's another message that I'd really like you to take away. When you think about analytics, oh my God, got 4 minutes. When you think about analytics, think about it in 3 ways. Really, think about it, analytics in your domain. So in other words, in the learning domain. What is it that you want to do, right? Then think about it across HR. And then, where you'll get the biggest value of all is when you take analytics across your company. And when you start to correlate data, not just from HR, but to other areas of the bank. Imagine you want to correlate some learning data with what my developers are doing on a day-to-day basis. You won't have a clue what my developers are doing, right? Unless you get linked into the data coming in and out of my development systems, the platforms that I use to deliver software, sales and trading guys in the bank. You won't have a clue how they operate, what they're doing, why they're doing it, unless you start to bring that data and link it to some of your HR data, if you really want to have insights. So this is why data is so important, right? Because you ultimately, you will only start delivering real value to your company and getting real insights to deliver better learning is when you get data across the company. And if you don't have that data, how are you going to do it? Okay? If your product that you buy doesn't give it to you, what are you going to do? You've just lost a whole gold mine of data. So keep it simple. There's something in the middle there that says, data is the new oil. I heard this at one of the NASCOM conferences. It is. Treat it like oil. It is so valuable, it's unbelievable. Do not sacrifice access to your data under any circumstance. It is not worth it. You will come back to regret. Ultimately, as a CIO, I can't make that decision for you. I can only advise you. But you, as the business, will make that decision. Okay? Don't give up on your user experience, as I said, and finally, analytics. These 3 things, if you keep these in focus, you will be set up for the future. And everything that you do will work really, really well. Again, these slides are available, so you can look at what I'm doing at DB. There's a lot of questions around machine learning, deep learning, AI, and all these things. I just want to set the record straight in some examples, I guess. Machine learning has always been a part of computer science. Ever since I graduated in computer science, it was part of my training. The difference is like the charts that I showed you. There are some things you cannot do at that time because of constraints in technology. And there are some things that are just not appropriate at that time. So for example, when I started my career, what mattered in technology was pure computational power. You just wanted to automate and do massive calculations. No one cared about the user experience. It didn't matter. You had to have these calculators, right? The computers that we had in the old days, right? You just had to produce high performance calculations. Now that's all possible. Now you can focus on user experience. It's the same thing with machine learning. Now the environment is there. You've got your compute power. You've got your memory. You've got your storage. You've got huge amounts of data is what you need. Now you can use machine learning algorithms to deliver value. So my view, ignore AI. It's a confusing term. Got 1 minute left. Honestly, forget it. What AI really is a way of you being able to think out the box, unconstrained. Go back to basic principles. And what I say here is this, right? Whatever you do, ultimately, everything that happens in your company is a process. Right? Everything is a process. Even producing analytics is a process. Okay? So stick to processes. Processes generate data. and they use data. Onboarding, right, will generate some data. It requires some data, for example, for let's say the position. Whichever way you think is ultimately a process. And given the importance of data, the old-fashioned data modeling, data ownership has not gone away. It is not old-fashioned. It is more critical than ever. You just won't hear about it in all the buzzwords, okay? If you want machine learning, if you want AI and all these things, you'll get garbage in and garbage out, right? You have to get hold of your data, understand it, make sure it's good before you get the value at the other end. And just a point here, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to quickly touch on this because I'll get told off. Learning and development specifically. The 4 points that you see here are my own personal opinions, okay? In technology, I need to get in front of the curve. I always feel like my developers are learning skills 2 years too late. How do I get in front, right? Already your employees are using many mechanisms for learning, most of which HR is not even aware of. You probably only capture 15%, 10% of the learning channels that our people use, right? They will use networks inside the company and outside the company, for example. And it still seems like the learning and performance is way out of sync. Way out of sync. Agile, if you take up Agile, you will see it brings it together by definition, right? And I can't discover it today. And finally, I think you've all experienced LMSs and the limited value they provide. So just to finish off, what I'll say is this. I can see talent acquisition doing really well because I think it's easy, because the data is available outside the company, public, tons and tons of it. The harder part is how you take learning and development up to the next level. And we talk here about searching and recommending. Absolutely agree, that is the key area we should be focusing on. But you won't be able to do it unless you get hold of your data. So when you speak to your product vendors, make sure they give you the data. And when they say, don't worry, you've got APIs, you can have it, no problem. Use your IT guys to validate. The APIs typically only give you outputs. They don't give you all of the data. Get every single bit of data back into the company. I have to stop there, guys. There's some actions that you can take. I want to do some Q&A. I've recently run out of time. You can always grab me afterwards. Hope that was useful. Thank you very much.